Hello, everybody. It's me, Fee, White Zulu, and I want to welcome you to another chapter of, another chapter of Okavango Diary. And I hope you're enjoying these readings. I want to welcome you all. And if you are enjoying them, please share or press the like button or whatever people do if they want to. I'm sorry, I'm a bit car today. I haven't got any words in front of me to read, so I'm doing this off the cuff. However, this is a greeting to you all and a welcome, and I hope that you enjoy these chapters that I'm reading out. They go out twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, if all goes well. And enjoy them, and thank you so much for listening to them. Share them around. Thank you and goodbye. So in Zulu, I regaled her with my experiences of lions sniffing at the door of my hut, and all she can say is, "Oh, Nkosazana," over and over again in utter disbelief. After the office closes, Yvonne, the accountant bookkeeper for Heartless Safaris, takes me to the renowned Duck Inn for a drink. There I meet the owner of the inn, but I keep very quiet about my surname in case they tie me to my ex-husband, who had been manager of the small Barclays Bank branch in Maun for several years, and in fact had remarried to the cashier of the local supermarket. As I have explained before, the Duck Inn is situated on the very edge of the airport, just where the sand ends and the tarmac begins. It's quite a large tin-roofed building, and in between it and the tarmac runway is a large, deep donga, otherwise known as a ditch. Balanced across the donga, it's a long plank about a foot wide which bends substantially in the middle. I didn't witness this myself, but among the pilots the saying was that if you could walk along the plank and make it onto the runway without falling into the donga, if you did fall in and you were able to scramble out and make it up the very unstable and crumbling sandy bank with great difficulty, then you were sober enough to fly. The place was packed with young men, and all but a few of them were bush pilots. The place was absolutely heaving and very noisy. There were dozens of empty lager cans on every small table, and at the long bar the men were shoulder to shoulder, all drinking copiously from cans of lager or having shots of God knows what spirits. Right in the center of this big room was a huge ceiling fan rotating slowly as an attempt to reduce the heat coming off the corrugated iron roof. Directly under the fan, a group of men was sitting at a small table. As one of them finished his lager, he casually, place completely. Just bear with me, folks. Nearly there. We're at the Duck Inn. Right in the center of this big room was a huge ceiling fan rotating slowly as an attempt to reduce the heat coming off the corrugated iron roof. Directly under the fan, a group of men was sitting at a small table. As one of them finished his lager, He casually tossed the empty can directly upwards and into the ceiling fan with astonishingly accuracy. This resulted in dented cans of aluminium flying around the whole room and landing in people's drinks or on their heads and laps. I turned to Yvonne and asked, who is it doing this rather reckless act every time he drained yet another lager and tossed the tin into the fan, creating mayhem? Oh, he's the search and rescue helicopter pilot, she explained, casually. Having already had a lot of experience with drunk pilots, I wasn't that surprised. I just felt sorry for the Xuxana waiters who had to duck and dive as they jinked and dodged their way to a table, carrying a large tray of yet more cold lager. These projectiles of aluminium didn't help them much either. The other reason I felt sorry for the waiters was that there was a dartboard fastened to the wall, but placed directly in the entrance between the kitchen behind the bar and the seating area, which was packed with tables, chairs and pilots. If there was a dart game on, the waiters had to hover, carrying their trays, for a pause in the darts competition before they lunged through the danger zone between dart and board to get the drinks safely to a table of uproariously drunk pilots. We chose the long stoop in front of the bar outside to be safe from flying missiles, and had a bite of supper there. Then we went to the farm for the night. I'm sleeping in the owner's bed in the tent again, as the Cape-coloured builders are in the only other habitable room in the house, apart from Yvonne's room, which she shares with her cat. We're both tired, and the Jenny, the generator, goes off at 9 p.m. So it's pitch dark now, and I have only a torch and candle for light. I have a shower and get into bed. Again, I'm joined on my pillow by Badger, the owner's Jack Russell Terrier. I chuck Badger out. This time he stays out. I get up and go to the loo, flush it, and get back into bed. The loo carries on flushing and won't stop. I jammed something under the ball cock in the cistern in the daylight. It turns out to be one of my female boss's expensive-looking hairbrushes. I am woken by early by loud, continuous mooing, braying of donkeys and goats bleating, coming from across the Tamalakani River. This cacophony is accompanied by the clanging of homemade tin bells, which the local stock owners tie around their animals' necks. I looked across to the other bank, which is just dust. The Botswana stock owners have fenced off the water with great piles of thorn bushes, so they can't get a drink, and all their poor dehydrated domestic animals are milling around, kicking up dense clouds of dust and bowling with thirst. Yvonne comes down and explains that they don't like allowing their stock to go and drink freely from the river because of crocodiles. So they fence them off from the water with the thorns and only let them drink once a day, first thing in the morning. This is in the heat. It was already up to 38 degrees, and at 8 o'clock, still early morning, and it's not nearly enough water to last their stock for 24 hours. So, this is the morning concert that any guests staying in this luxury lodge will be woken to, I asked her. She shrugged and continued, I find it the most distressing noise, as I know how thirsty those poor beasts are, and what short time they're allowed to drink before being chased away and out into the bush with nothing for them to eat or drink for 24 hours. They don't feed them either, but leave them to forage among the plastic rubbish found lying about everywhere. Most of them look like toast racks. They're so thin and neglected, and they never get any treatment for worms or ticks either. I hate it. I told her that I had seen a bloated dead donkey on my arrival in Maun, and she explained that it was par for the course. You'll also see how they hobble their stock by tying the front legs together, so that they have to hobble gruesomely in order to get any scarce food that there is. And I told her that I'd already seen that distressing sight. Having lived all my life in Africa, I knew it was no fun to be an animal belonging to an African. Finally, later on that morning, Thursday, 31st of July, Boyson, the black driver, comes to fetch me in the clapped-out old stallion bakkie with no brakes and held together with wire. We get to Maun office, dodging goats and donkeys. I'm driven to immigration department offices by Gladys, a stout Xuxana woman. Said this is a first for me, as I had never before been driven by an African woman. In fact, she drives really carefully, much better than Yvonne, who'd had several whiskies the night before, and was so busy talking that she wasn't looking at the road for donkeys hobbling out in front of the vehicle. With the instructions from Pauline ringing in my ears of lie to them and tell them that you've been staying with your cousin, mentioning the name of one of my bosses, at the farm for the last month, and certainly not working in a lodge, or they'll put you on the first plane out of here. I had been instructed to make 10 certified copies of all my credentials, my CV and any other documentation that could prove I was capable of doing the job rather than a Botswana citizen, which is the rule in that country. No foreigners are allowed to work there unless it's in a position that cannot be filled by a local person. I had forged a certificate to say that I spoke fluent French and had done a cordon bleu cookery course in Switzerland. These two attributes were absolutely true, but had taken place 30 years beforehand, and I'd never received any certificates from the finishing school I had attended. I didn't date my forgery, so they wouldn't realize that my French had become rather rusty. I also gave them a copy that stated I was an honorary member of the Natal Parks Board. They looked a bit baffled by my achievements on the ski slopes of Switzerland, but it was all in French, and I'd brought my silver medal to show them it was legit. Many hours of laborious scrutiny, heavy questioning, and a lot of rubber stamping by the Botswana officials at the immigration office later, and I came out with a temporary stamp valid for a year. Then I spent a hectic morning trying to do some shopping for Fred and Mark and buy myself a decent torch in the town, on foot in the hot and yielding sand streets and other detritus, which crept into my sandals, and I had to keep stopping to take them off and shake them out. There was horrifically loud African music constantly blaring in my ears. It was such a shock after the delicious quiet of the bush camp. Back at the office, I tried unsuccessfully to ring my older son, Alistair. Then Pauline took me to the Maun airport to catch Alpha Juliet Echo. I was waiting with the mailbag when Martin, the pilot who'd spent the night at Saro last week, spotted the familiar mailbag, waved me over, and I hopped on board. The flight takes about 20 minutes, and it's idyllic. Flying low and seeing elephants, buffalo, giraffe, and hippo from the air. On approach to the Xuxana strip, Martin peers through the cockpit windscreen and asks, "Is that an elephant or a vehicle on the airstrip?" I can't tell either. It turns out to be a very cross Cape Buffalo bull, but he moves off quickly as we land. We'll offload some cargo and pick up 2 Americans, Ellen and her nephew Daniel, from Washington, D.C. Also a Botswana man and all his stuff, which Martin knew nothing about, and whom he has to take back to Maun, as the guy who was a guide there was sick. Pilot said some very bad words as he tried to squash this lot into Juliet Echo. We flew on to Xuxana. There we were met by a guide called Englishman. He's a very black Botswana tribesman who's come to fetch us in the camp's boat, as this lodge is on a peninsula. We were met by Nikki, the South African hostess, and the couple who are the permanent manager and manageress. They are also English-speaking South Africans. I left my bag on the bank and was then given a tour of the camp and a rundown of my duties down to the minutest details, especially the individual faults of each member of staff, all in the heat of the midday sun. The last time I'd had any food was supper at the Duck Inn the night before, and I was terribly thirsty as well. Eventually, at about 6 p.m., when it was starting to get dark, the permanent manageress said, "I suppose you'd better see your room now." Fred, who'd been doing relief management for years and knew Xuxana well, had said that we'd spend the month in Pilot's 1 and Pilot's 2 huts, both single rondavels and right next to the office, which is in the center of the camp. He explained that the permanent manager's residence was too far away from the office to be practical. At Saro, he'd stayed in one of the pilot's accommodation, moving only briefly to share with Mark when the camp was overflowing. This woman said, "Certainly not. You're to stay at Moxa, the manager's cottage, but we'll be in there tonight, so I've put you into room 1. I mildly suggested that I'd rather go straight into Pilot's 2, and after a long struggle, she capitulated. My room is a tiny little thatched ensuite rondavel hut right next to the office and just perfect. Seated at dinner that night were 25 people, and it was a nightmare, as I was neither guest nor manageress, and she'd made a balls up and miscounted the seats, so there weren't enough places laid. We had 3 Italians, Ellen and Daniel, the Americans, 2 Australians, a French school teacher with not a word of English. I'd learned by now to treat all French school teachers with extreme caution. 4 charming people from New Jersey, and a lovely family also from New Jersey. There was a dad, a mum, and 2 delightful teenage daughters. The dinner was pretty much a disaster. I finally flopped into bed, exhausted, at about 10:30 that night, to the sound of the manageress berating the brand new and very raw waitress, Leah.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my videos and my stories of my life. And I want to thank John Moslane for being what I call the sound engineer, but I'm sure there's a more professional word for it. However, faithful, and for 4 years now, I think, he has been here for me every Wednesday. Well, I think it's Wednesdays, but once a week to record 2 chapters of whichever book it is I'm reading. And without him, this couldn't be done. So a big thank you to John. Also, Sean van Vuren, We send the videos to him. Sorry, I'm not reading this. I'm just doing it off the cuff. And my brain is a bit Jumaka. And Sean uploads them to the YouTube channel where you can find them all in playlists. He does it beautifully. And I want to thank them both for all the help that they give me. Well, it's not help. They do everything for me. And it's a great asset. So also, I have a website called whitezulubook.com, obviously www in front of it, but you'll find it there. Quite easy to find. Johnny Clegg's called The White Zulu. Mine's called White Zulu. And you will find on my website, you'll find all kinds of photographs going way back to when my ancestors settled in the Cape, 1652. Well, not photographs of them, but descriptions. This photograph of my grandmother's wedding, and lovely, lovely photos of the farm we still own. My sister sent me a photograph this morning of the farm in midsummer, and she says how beautiful it's looking. I've had a lot of rain. So, just want to thank my helpers, John and Sean, to thank you all for listening, and also please share this with everybody else. Hit the like button and enjoy. Goodbye.